So just basically done a video talk the other day about Statue of Liberty on Liberty Island, and I then just realised that Liberty Island is pretty much the exact same size as the Warriors' Tomb Hill in Dalton. So that's significant when we go with the origins of the Liberty theme, the Liberal Party, Liberal area, and the Liberty Caps shape and form, and our area always seeming to have a strong heritage with being affiliated with the Liberals. It all seems to fit. Now, then, because I had got a copy of the Chas P. Hobkirk book, which actually was signed with the date on it, and it was a little bit earlier than what Wikipedia said the date was, then it fit with the timing for, it allowed for the planning and building of the Statue of Liberty on Liberty Island. This was before the Warriors' Tomb Liberty-shaped mound actually was built on, quite a while before it. So on the theme of that shape of the Liberty Island and the Warriors' Tomb Hill, going with the Liberty Cap shape for symbolic reasons. So just after I put that video out, and I attached it to the petition, because it's worth knowing, Neil Oliver has just put a video with this really interesting object that he talks about, which also is the same shape. And actually, most websites only refer to it as the Alfred Jewels, but it's actually called the Jewel Terminal of Aestel. The Jewel Terminal of Aestel, and it's meant to be presumably dated 871 to 899. So I'm not sure about the date on it. I would like to know what they date it by, what processes and chemical procedures they've dated it from, or just by what other contemporary items are similar. Because as far as I know, and I've done lots of videos about the Gundestrup Cauldron, mainly because I question the symbology on the Gundestrup Cauldron with events that happened around the time of it being found, and the symbology in it. I kind of had a lot of events that seemed to be happening in real time around that time it was found that seemed to be appearing in the imagery of that item. And the thing is that they're saying, even though they can test the metals of that object and say where the metals come from, you can't actually carbon date the metal itself and say this metal is so old. All you can say is it might have the same content mix of materials that are sourced from certain places that match. So you could have got metals from those places and then made it at any time and then made it to look old, possibly, depending on how proficient you are. It may be that the Gundestrup Cauldron is legitimate and authentic. I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but what I'm saying is it can't be carbon dated. And when you get right into the symbology meaning of it, and I was really into that object for a long time. Once I started getting into real events that were happening around that time, I suddenly, because I already knew the symbology off the top of my head for that cauldron, I was like, oh wow, that's interesting, because there were some other things on there that seemed to fit with it that were happening around the time that it was found. Quite important things that if you were influenced and going to put things into it, then it would have been a lot more than a coincidence. But then again, that you can pull it out of the hat at any time. You can compare things to things, but the things seemed very prominent like, you know, the refining chemicals, you know, like when there's a lot of drugs in circulation around that time, you know, heroin, cocaine, and they're getting, you know, pure of them and doing lines of them and stuff like that. Then you've got the invention of the telephone line cabled into all the police chiefs and all that, which one of the plates on there really, really sort of fits that. The telephone, invention of the telephone and installing it, you know, and I thought that was significant on one of those plates. You know, and then when you look at the, you know, it's from Germany, and then when you look at the places, there was a place called Worm, and it's got a long worm on it. And in fact, that long worm shape is actually on that Tolkien map as well. The worm, I've just done a talk about the Tolkien map when Tolkien bases it on Cumbria coastline, and then when he goes this mountains to Mordor, it's like this snake pan. So you know, there's another worm. So, but you can go right through back all my YouTube videos and listen to the talk on that. Although it is a long talk because I edited like 7 videos into one. So, all that aside, this is actually concentrating on now on this dual terminal of aestel, which Neil Oliver has just done a video on, and I didn't even know about this object. I didn't even know it existed because, you know, I'm not an absolute history boffin. In fact, I have actually been thinking to myself, you know, instead of being out traveling around the country, going to lots of places and seeing lots of places and getting to know the landscape of the country, what I haven't done in my life is spent a lot of time going to the museums and looking at the artifacts, you know. I haven't actually seen them close up in person. I've seen photos of some of them, but I think sometimes when you see something in real life and see the size of it, and it's completely different to looking at a picture of it. So I've not been to all the museums. I haven't seen all of the Celtic artifacts. I haven't seen, you know, all of the Anglo-Saxon artifacts. So this object that Neil Oliver has shown us is really interesting. And funnily enough, there was another video not too long ago. It might have been one of the prehistory guys videos, I think, when he, one of the archaeologists, a young one, he gets out a copy that he's got of the shaman antlers that were found on the North Yorkshire, North East coast. And you see, when you look at photos of them, the size of them and the scale of them makes the object look different to what it actually is. And when this archaeologist gentleman put them on his head, the item itself is actually a very different item to how it appears in the photos and from the way that they photograph it. Because I actually thought the item from those photographs was actually distinctively different, just simply because of the scale difference you get of it through the photographs and the way it's positioned and made to look in the photos. In fact, it would have been a lot better to photograph it actually if they'd have got like a mannequin or something like that, or you know, like a replica head, and actually fastened it on to it. Then it would have actually completely changed the way that people imagine and see that artifact through the photos that we're presented with. So that was interesting as well. But anyway, let's get back onto this item with Neil Oliver, because I shouldn't. Well, I did think it was relevant to mention all that. So this dual terminal of aestel, the first thing that I noticed once it got towards the end of the video, I thought, I don't know whether it was me or whether it was Neil, but I thought he mentioned 2 conflicting dates. I thought he mentioned one date when it was meant to have been found, and then later on towards the end of the video he mentioned it again, but I thought he said a different date, so I'll have to watch the video back. Maybe he was talking about something else, but I thought there was 2 dates that he threw in there that were contradictory to each other, so I'll have to go back and watch it. But as for the item itself, I didn't even know this item existed, these Anglo-Saxon religious items, so with all these amazing letters and writing around them. Now, I'm always dubious and always the skeptic of authenticity, particularly if something's metal, because apparently we can't carbon date it, so we don't know how legitimate it is or not. That's the thing. So I'm not too sure how they date this, if it's a contemporary dating with other similar pieces they found, or whether it's a dating that's actually chemically dated, that's accurate. And are they basing? Have they got that date from the non-metal parts of it? So that's interesting. Other than that, the rest of what I've got to say about the item is purely symbolic. So it's all symbology the whole way through. So, I mean, to start with, it is the Liberty Cap shape, tier. It's a tier, and it does match the shape, funnily enough, of the Warriors Mound, Warriors 2 Mount site, and of Liberty Island. So, there's that. The thing that I find interesting, the main thing on this piece that I think is really, 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 really interesting is that you look at the picture on the flat surface of the top, which is meant to be in enamel, and it's some people might say that they've seen better pictures or more accurate pictures. For the time, it might have been, but it is more of what we'd call a caricature style. I mean, I'm no artist. I can't do a pencil drawing that's literally like a photograph, and I can't paint a picture that is identical to a photograph. I've got paintings here next to me that I've done that aren't bad, but they've still got that caricature style to them. It's not all 100% lifelike. It's a painting, and it tends to be more caricature-like, which obviously is more amateur standard. But although some people want it to be that style, and it's a style in itself, but so what's interesting about the character on this dual terminal of aestel is that it isn't 100% lifelike. Like, some of the Roman statues that the Romans are making are very, very accurate and lifelike, and some, obviously, all these paintings, that Leonardo and Raphael and people like that do are what you call near perfect, almost photographic, like, you know what I mean? So it is a caricature, but the thing is, the actual golden reptile head on it, whether you want to call it a dragon or a reptile or a snake or whatever, is that is three-dimensional model, and it is very, very lifelike, accurate to a high degree. So unless it's a different artist who's made it to the artist who did the enamel part of it, the skill that exists to make that is a lot more accurate if you want it to be real and lifelike compared to the flat two-dimensional picture on top. Now, does that mean that someone might have been able to or could have done a two-dimensional picture to 100% lifelike accuracy? And if they could, why didn't they? If they could have done the 3D sculpturing part of it, whether it's in metal or clay or whatever, to a lifelike high standard, was it meant to be like that? So, but then again, if you want to start getting into, Dennis and Terence McKenna, Jonathan Ott, Graham Hancock subject, which is a professional, legitimate subject to discuss and know about and watch videos on, and, anthropology or whatever you want to call it, psychedelics, that when you have the, visions and hallucinations in, in your surroundings on objects, you kind of get this, I guess it's the LSD effect. You get this play of light where you can actually, characters appear from the lightness and darkness around you in various objects. Like, for example, you could look at a folded white sheet over the other side of the room, and because the light falls on it a certain way, it quite easily could make a face. And it's usually basic shapes of light and dark. And that is the basic principle of art and drawing, in how this two-dimensional character is made up from the colours, particularly his face, the light and dark, on the flat part of the terminal. So, and in a way, you can study drawing and learn about art and drawing from watching the play. The light, how shade and lighting, it is made up, and you could probably trace all that all the way back to Algeria. When they're doing cave paintings, whether they're carving them out of stone or using light and shade on walls. People have been drawing on walls for millennia. But obviously the writing around it, those Latin letters is kind of separate. It's interesting. It's interesting to have those letters around the edge, because obviously, that language was brought over here. Apparently, they were meant to be really poetic at using the language. So we hear in another program that the Anglo-Saxons actually supposedly were meant to have been more creative with the writing and letters than what the Greeks were, but I don't know if that's true or not. It's funny that the reptile head on there reminds you of these jaguars that they have in South America. It's very, very similar, in fact, to the logos and icons that they have in the main writing, You see, straight away, I mean, I did actually think of the Pembrey Cross Hill Fort, which is a long snake neck with the hill fort on the head at the end. I kind of thought of the dragon's head. But it actually, the whole model itself, the whole item, it's actually not got the shaft part attached to it. They're saying that it's supposed to have a pointer or a shaft part attached to it, which, that you get additional symbology with that, with a complete piece. But it's almost as if it's a frog, because the actual size of to be honest, it doesn't look like a handle. If you made something that was to be held or like a handle, surely it would be more shaped to fit with the fingers, like a hilt of a sword or something. But they're saying it was a pointer to be held, but it really kind of, to me, it doesn't look very, why would you go into so much effort for such a brilliant piece if it didn't fit in the hand to the shape of the fingers when you go around it? That's what I think. It doesn't seem to fit in the hand very well. And funnily enough, saying that, there's some strange black gloves keep being left all around, and I don't know why that is. And actually, funnily enough, on the front cover of the newspaper today, there was, in somewhere actually in Deaton, not too far from that Warrington place, somebody apparently lost their hand in some pub or nightclub in some incident that the police attended. So there's some strange stuff going on there. I don't know what's going on at the moment, but there is lots of strange things happening. But then again, stranger things have happened, like the Liberal Ciaran Morris versus Ciaran Morris incidents. Strange things are going on. That's what we need to know, Why are these things happening and how are they happening would be enlightening to all of us. Anyway, so, yeah, it doesn't look to me to be made to fit in a hand, which is quite unusual. Although in the picture, he's holding on to something in the picture, but it's got a lot more at the end of it than a pointer, hasn't it, in the picture. oddly enough. So the detail in that reptile's face is so intricate, why wouldn't you go to as much trouble to get as good accurate detail in the two-dimensional picture on it, in the enamel, unless it's not possible. But why do it in enamel? You could have done the whole thing in gold, and it could have been really detailed, and lifelike on the top if that had been metal as well. Did they want it to be a more simple, broken down play of light, But saying that, I make things, and I'm not very skilled or good at making things. I just like making things for the idea of it, and I'm not that bothered about the mega detail on it. Maybe that's, it comes with a certain culture and a certain history. Maybe it's a more ideological background where it's more important for the meaning and the symbology of it than the lifelike accuracy, But then again, saying that, there is an accuracy and skill in the reptilian part of this object. So, unless there's two different artists and you got someone to help. Now, the main thing about this item, which is the main sort of thing that I'm curious about with it, is it does look more frog-like than anything, except minus some legs. It's almost perfectly a frog. Now, if we're looking at Liberty Cap's Liberty shape object, right, we know that when you're getting into psychedelics, you're getting on the same subject with Liberty Caps and psilocybin as 5-MeO DMT. And we know that 5-MeO DMT or buffetine comes from the buffalo frog. So you can actually get very similar psychedelic serotonin compounds from magic mushroom to what you can get from the certain frogs. But according to science and the ethnobotany, or not ethnobotany, according to the animal studies, the species distribution, this frog is only existing in South America or in the Americas, right? Doesn't exist over here. So that's curious and interesting. But the weird thing that I've always been curious about is to do with the pyramids. Why are there pyramids in South America and why are there pyramids in Egypt? Could it be that there's this consciousness of the planet where the ideas that are happening in Egypt can be transmitted over to another continent without anyone going there, and they just pick the ideas up from the airwaves and they end up kind of similarly doing something similar without any actual contact, right? The other theory to do with the pyramids is that they actually did sail the Atlantic and they did set up some colonies and they did have a little bit of influence and exchange on the building of the pyramids. Even if it wasn't copied exactly, they did have some idea and influence. The Phoenicians, when they were sailing around at superhero speed around everywhere without a care in the world, and maybe there was some information about that in the Library of Alexandria or something like that. And maybe when the Roman Empire started to expand and take over Europe, maybe it got cut off, that culture, because there wasn't any long-term sailing across the Atlantic, or it got banned, and they burned all the knowledge of it and cut it off. Now, is there any reason why they might want to do that? Well, both of those cultures, when you're talking about Mayans and buffalo frogs and ayahuasca and religions before Christianity, you bang on target when you've got an object that has got a Liberty Cap on it and also a buffalo frog. Because if there was anything that was going to join together the South American culture in using various plants, trees, bark, wood, cacti, mushrooms and frogs, then it's it joins it with a liberty cap. So if there's going to be anything that join those two continents together, it will be that object. Now, the funny thing is, the Romans actually banned the Druids' religion and wanted to try and wipe out the Druids' religion because Christianity wasn't even legal. The Romans weren't fans of religion, or if they were, they wanted it for themselves, for their own secret knowledge and use. I mean, they had the Prophet of Delphi and all that. Delphi, even in Greece, so they knew about the mysteries and all that, but they didn't want there to be these religious orders. They wanted the Roman government to be in charge through a governmental setup, not a religious setup. So not even Christianity was allowed, and they wanted to get rid of the Druids. Now, if it's a big if any Phoenicians or anyone's Tom, Dick or Harry had sailed over to the Americas, and if, the pyramids in South America surely are not the pyramids in Egypt, but if they might have mentioned it to them, or, and it takes a long time to build these things, if they might have mentioned this and that and the other, and if there might have been some sort of exchange and some people stayed over there and then ended up melting into that culture or whatever, and if the sailing or trade route got cut off because of a war and then evidence of it got destroyed and forgotten because they were far busy trying to take over Europe, or if there was something like that going on, I'm not saying there was or there wasn't, but, they've now got evidence that there's even DNA from Australians in South America, and now they're saying that they didn't come across the top of Canada and down. They're saying that that's not the case. There's evidence against that theory as well. So if, and they know that some of the Vikings definitely sailed to North America, that's an actual fact. We know that's a fact that some of the Vikings sailed to North American continent and made it there. So did they show them the frog? And did they bring one back? Or aren't the scientists telling us the truth? Are there some other frogs that aren't just in the Americas? Are there some in Europe, Africa? Were there those frogs in Africa before it dried up, or any part of Europe or anywhere that also have buffeting, but they just don't want us to know about it because they don't want people to go get them because they're illegal, or, are they all extinct now? Like bears, there's no bears in England, no more frogs. Or is that evidence that this item could be a coup or a joke item or a forged item where it's not actually really an Anglo-Saxon item from the era of King Alfred? It is more of a 1800s romantic item created with great skill and dexterity, not unlike the Gundestrup Cauldron could have been around that time, an exotic fantasy item, which, by that time, they'd actually, Christopher Columbus had been over to South America, and they didn't know about the frogs and that, This is the thing. We don't know. I mean, what is the carbon dating evidence on the item itself, on the terminal of aestel? Not the metal, surely, but, on the enamel or whatever it is, what evidence we got? Someone's got the evidence, Neil Oliver didn't mention that because he doesn't question it. This is the thing with the news, this is the statement of the century. Do not question the authenticity of the story you are reporting. Now, that really is the religious order. This is the hymn. This is the prayer of the press. The prayer of the press. The prayer of Rupert Murdoch. It's like the Lord's Prayer. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those trespasses against us, and His kingdom, power, and glory forever. Amen. The prayer and the hymn of the press, the modern press, no matter whether it's Rupert Murdoch or The Guardian or Calendar News or Jeremy Vine or, whatever, the prayer of the press is, do not question the authenticity of the story you are reporting. Do not question the authenticity of the story you are reporting. Do not question the authenticity of the story you're reporting. This is the prayer of the press. Do not question the legitimacy of the events that you're reporting. Do not ever question the legitimacy of the events you're reporting. That is the prayer of the press. Everything that happens is legitimate. It happened legitimately, and that is it. And we will not ever go into questioning the legitimacy of the events that we are reporting. We will question the legitimacy of the age of this object that we are talking about. And that's kind of the same with the gunship cauldron in a way. There are investigators who investigate the items, but that's why they're supposed to test it. This is what they're doing when they test it. But who is testing the integrity of the methods that they're using to date it? Who's the person who tests the legitimacy or the the robustness of the methods that are using in investigation? It's like fingerprinting. You can fingerprint anything, but how do you know the prints were planted in the first place? Then you start going. This is why police men come out with statements like, don't think about it too much. If you don't think about it too much, how are you going to solve the crime? This is like Sherlock Holmes and Watson. It's don't think about it, but not too much. That's why there's lots of people in prison that might not have actually committed the offence. This is a problem. But then the police apparently don't like getting too paranoid. But that's the word, paranoid. Are you playing from a different par or a different caliber? Are there people around who are in a greater caliber to even the police? Like the ones who planted the telephone lines into the police chiefs' houses when the telephone was invented, so they had a direct line, and then there's motifs popping up in the gunship cauldron. Is there the only certain who's privy? Which council is privy to this information? Is there a council above the councils, above the councils, above the councils that is BlackRock, Vanguard, investors, no one knows who's at the top of the pyramid type thing going on? And they're the ones who have really got all the advanced technology, who are flying spaceships over Robbie Williams' house, let me entertain you type thing, and messing around with the Air Force's gadgets, because there is a department above the departments that is making sure it's one step ahead of everyone else. And planting these items. That's the thing. And I guess, then you get into David Icke, and, but that's the thing. Now that we're not restrained by mainstream television, and now that the prayer of we shall not question the legitimacy of the events that we are reporting, now that prayer is kind of, people are free from that prayer, like, Russell Brand, and I guess sort of to an extent, Lawrence Fox, Neil Oliver are starting to come around a bit. People are questioning things, but that's not really how the government like it, because then by only having, BBC One, BBC Two, ITV and Channel 4, they're very much in control of the mainstream public consciousness, and we do not think about those things, we don't talk about those things on mainstream television, because then there would be, you would question everything, you would question the legitimacy of the government, but now, because of YouTube and things like that, people who do think about things are questioning it, and this is why now we're into a situation where, people are questioning things, and it seems to me, I didn't even know about this item. There were a lot of ancient sites that I didn't know about. But now, because of Facebook and people throwing photographs up of all these sites that we didn't know about, then people are starting to find out that they exist. It's like Northern Ireland. Some people used to go to Northern Ireland. A lot of people used to go to Northern Ireland. But there was a lot of people who didn't go to Northern Ireland because of all those troubles, and they were scared of going there and put off going there, There's all sorts in Northern Ireland. Like, people used to go over there and, do TV. Why don't you? People used to go to skateboard parks, do demos over there. There were people going there, obviously older people, but, when you're talking about, if there was something that someone really wanted to go over there for, like to go to Giant's Causeway, and there was a strong enough pull for them to urge to go over there, but I don't think that people used to know about the ancient sites over there, not back in the 60s and 70s, because of all the IRA stuff. It put people off wanting to go there, or, you know, they thought that it was scary or dangerous, you know, they were frightened. So, you know, people weren't going over to Ireland and looking at ancient sites. And I certainly didn't really hear or see much about all the Scottish sites. And now it turns out there are loads of them, like all these cairns, you know, that dwarfy thing that's carved out, all the different recumbent stone circles, like, you know, loads and loads and loads of them. And then these brochs and that, you know, it's almost like ridiculous the amount of things there are in Scotland. So, you know, and Scotland manages to have not been overly built up everywhere like we have. So, you know, it's, you know, so I think now is the time when people are questioning things. So, I mean, is it a coincidence that it, you know, is that meant to be a snake head and it's almost like the snake's wrapped round the edge of the terminal of aestel and it comes back round again and it just happens to be a little bit like a frog shape, you know? They're frogs in this country, normal frogs, you know, but why would they have associated frogs with the Liberty Cap shape and with the religious experience, which clearly it is a religious item that has connection with religious experience? And we know from, you know, Alex Gray and Terence McKenna and Jonathan Norton and everyone like that, that, you know, these things are connected. So, you know, it's you know, it's interesting. Is this item legitimate? Are there any other frogs besides the buffalo one that might not have been in South America? Did we have a connection, or had we been to South America before they admit that we had done? And, you know, what else aren't they telling us? That's the question, you know. And if this item is a legitimate Anglo-Saxon religious item, and if they didn't know about the buffalo frog back then, you know, but it just happens to be coincidental that it's around the size of a frog's body, you know, and it's actually supposed to be more like a snake or the dragon, and it's kind of puts together the dragon motif and the Liberty Cap, you know, then, you know, we've got that Hembury Cross hill fort. It's almost like the dragon head of the Hembury Cross hill fort, and then it's got the mound, but also like the dragon mound at Uffington. But it's also like the Liberty Cap shaped mound that we've got here, Warrior's Tomb, which is a perfect Liberty shape and symbolically in the valley, like you find the Liberty down in the long grass, you know. So, which is also, funnily enough, the reed grass, certain varieties of reed grass is supposed to have 5-MeO DMT in it as well. So there are a lot of questions I have about this item. I find it really interesting. It is an amazing item, but, you know, when was it made, and how strong is the evidence to suggest that it is 871 to 899, not going on the metal dating, going only on the enamel dating? Have they dated the enamel? You know, that's the question. And if it is legitimate, you know, do we have any connections to South America? Are there other animals in Europe that they haven't told us about, or in Africa? You know, this item actually raises a hell of a lot of questions, you know, and, you know, to be honest, if we're talking about mounds, then, you know, that symbolically for a mound, it's more fitting to ours than it is to any of the other ones, to be honest, you know, and that would actually definitely have some symbology if you're going to throw the Liberty Caps in there as well. You see, if that item is legitimate, then it is around the time of, if it's 871 to 899, it's around the time of the Book of Kells, isn't it? Then anyone's going to start questioning whether the Book of Kells is legitimate or not. But with that Book of Kells symbology, with the pictures in that book, I find very strong symbology showing a connection between Ireland and England, like a bridge. And there's also long barrow shape in there as well. There's a lot of symbology in shape in there. In fact, it's got some small dragon heads in there as well. There are some small lizard heads and the human head as well in the spirals on that item. But you see, that style of dragon is a little bit more of an influence from the Saxons coming over. The Vikings and Saxons would join these symbols inside some of the prehistoric cairns, particularly on the Scottish Islands. So their style of dragon's head, animal head, to represent the the scaled beast experience is, obviously they had it on the head of the ship as well, the figurehead of the ship. So that is a little bit more of their influence than if you go back to prehistoric times. You don't have the Latin writing. You've got spirals, you've got circles, you've got like all the Newgrange decorations. There's a lot of the decorations that are rubbed off that we can't see anymore. So it definitely does. It would. But the thing is, 871 to 899, it is that around the time we've got this merging, It's odd, though, that the South American, jaguar and the hieroglyphics fit that as well. But then again, that would be an interesting missing link, wouldn't it? Because if they said, the Vikings, because when you're talking about the whole Iceland bit, the whole history of Iceland and the whole history of the Vikings, yeah, the Vikings did go to North America. They did get to North America. They say they only got to a certain limited part of it, right? But if the Vikings got to North America, then they'd been up to the continent, right? And Americas is where you've got the whole, it's a lot further down the Americas, in the middle of America, you've got the whole Aztecs and Mayans and all that. So, there's a connection to the Americas and the Vikings with the dragon head face motif and the head of, the figurehead of the ship coming into the North Islands of Scotland and join that symbol on the cairns. And this is when you've got the, Anglo-Saxon versus Vikings, and then you've got a merger on the item of the Liberty Cap with the ship figurehead, dragon figure of ship. But even before that, you see, we don't, with the prehistoric, with the Iron Age and pre-Iron Age things in England, the sites, you don't actually get it that elaborately drawn as what the Vikings went to have drawn inside some of the cairns when they scrolled it inside up the north of Scotland. So, you get the hill fort is the form of the dragon. The actual land itself is the snake shape. But, you don't really get it. The only thing you get really is when you're getting into the Celtic knots, but that's more of the Celtic knots and the weaving is more of it's snake-like and body-like, but you don't tend to get the dragon heads on that, until you get this sort of Viking part on it. See, in the Book of Kells, you get those beast heads at the end of the spirals when they're doing it in the illuminations, but you also get human heads on there as well. But by that time, that's the same as this item here, which is 871 to 899 supposedly. So there's a hell of a lot of questions that these items raise. There's a hell of a lot of questions, serious questions, like what do you know about frogs? Psychedelic frogs, in 871. Well, have you been to America? No, we haven't. Well, have the Vikings been to America? Oh, well, actually, yeah, they've been to North America. And then they, been all around Iceland as well, and came into England, and they scrolled dragons on the inside of cairns, and now they're sort of merging with the Saxons, and dragons' heads are popping up on this item as well. So there's a lot of questions raised. Firstly, is this item legitimate? Or is it a romantic item that is forged? Secondly, if it is legitimate, then, does that explain why, if we've only got the Liberty Caps and we don't have psychedelic frogs, we don't, have anything other than, like the actual, we've got Henbury Cross Hill Fort, which is snake-like, but it's not frog-like, though, is it? And we've got the Celtic knots, but it would have been interesting to have seen some of the wooden things, the wooden items and carvings. Maybe there are some in the museum that I haven't seen. Maybe there are a lot more wooden carvings that are similar to this item that support it being authentic. Maybe that's what they're actually basing the authenticity on. Other items in the museum, many, 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 many items that are similar to or match it. That I don't know how many wooden items they've got. This is the problem. I haven't been to the museum. I haven't seen all the items in the museum. And that's where I'm missing out on it, but those are my questions. Those are things that I find interesting about it. I didn't even know that it existed, and then there are other things to talk about as well, so, and obviously this is the origins of the scepter then, obviously, the ceremonial scepter, which is actually more of a religious item, and they pass them out to multiple. He sent them out to the bishops, and if they're all as elaborate and decorative as that, then that's something. And they're clearly wanting to remember or make reference to the origins of the psychedelic experience, whether or not or how much they were engaging in it at that time or not. Clearly, quite a lot, evidently, if the Book of Kells is authentic and legitimate, because it's full of it. But then we've got this Christian wave that is wanting to eliminate that part of practice from the religion, or at least to the public. I think that, a lot of the Celts were getting baptised, and it was part of the culture to be baptised in the religion, actually really baptised. You see, this is Strabo. You see, Neil Oliver, what he doesn't tell you is when he talks about the Picts, and only the Picts were painted people, and they were distinctively different from the rest of the Celts because they were the only ones who were painted and had this weird culture that was so different from the rest of the Celts, which is absolute rubbish. Because this seems to be the only bit of information they've got that they seem to be able to pull out of the bag, which is, the Picts are unique, is that they're the ones who were painting themselves. Yet when we read Strabo, all of the Celts in Gaul are painting themselves as well, before Caesar started invading and came over. Before the Romans got anywhere near Scotland, the Gauls are painting themselves black, white, yellow, purple, green, and pink with sky blue with yellow dots on, in connection with the religious experiences. But it all gets wiped out and eradicated, and they stop from doing it. And then, for some reason, nobody seems to be mentioning that Strabo account when they talk about the Picts. They seem to have slipped their mind. So, no, the Picts are not unique, odd Celts who are rather strange with strange habits and practices that are completely weird and different to the rest of the Celts. I've never heard as much rubbish in my entire life. They might have been particularly unique at building these brochs and other things, but they're definitely not unique with their long barrows and stone circles, because everybody else in England around the coasts are building long barrows and cairns as well. The ones that are left. Maybe there were some brochs further down in and around England, but they got pulled to bits and used for stone masonry. So, it's interesting. So, that's what I've got to say about it. To me, the problem with archaeologists is they say, oh no, we've written it down, it's in the book, in a slightly aloof and, condescending, it's written down in, posh language where only my peers can know what I'm talking about. Not unlike the mathematicians who do these ridiculous formulas that only they can understand unless they tell you what the formula is on the blackboard. Because, basically, unless you study high-level mathematics, you won't have a clue what the hell they're scribbling about, It's a special language for special people, when really, if they wanted to, they could just write it in normal layman's terms and everyone would know, but they don't want you to know, because that's why they're not writing it in layman's terms. They're writing it in their own special language. So, spill the beans. They don't either A, it's privileged information for privileged people, or they don't know. Do they know if there are any other types of frogs in Africa or England that may have buffeting in them as well as the South American one? Or do they know that we actually did go to South America, or the Vikings went there? Or maybe we did, and maybe we just forgotten. Maybe it slipped our mind, like, the fact that half the Gaul was painting themselves sky blue, pink with yellow dots on in their religious experiences, but it slipped our mind. Even though Strabo write it down in black and white in clear writing. But it doesn't seem to pop into conversations when people are making videos about it. Why is that? Why are the Scots so individually unique in their weird, odd culture, which is not actually that weird or odd after all? Because it is a load of bollocks. It is no different from the rest of the Celtic culture that was all across Northern Europe. So why say it? Why say the Picts had a unique, odd practice of painting themselves, and everybody else in Europe thought they were odd when they didn't? Because it's a lie. They weren't odd and they weren't different from the Gauls in France. So why fucking say it? Why say it when it is a lie? Tim Darville, why do you omit the truth from the facts, Tim? Tell us the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help us God, or burst into flames. Tim, tell us the truth in layman's terms. Where are the frogs, Tim? Are there any in England and Africa? And did we sail to America? Oh yes, the Vikings did. Did we sail there too? And did we happen to have any boats that might have been capable of going there as well? Not just Viking ones. Particularly in a span of period between 500 and 1,500. Is it possible, Tim?